Three women vanished without a trace from a quiet home in Springfield, Missouri in the early hours of June 3rd of 2001. There were no signs of forced entry. Their purses, cars, and phones were left behind. What remained was a freshly made bed, an open graduation card on the kitchen counter, and the last message ever recorded on the answering machine, a hang-up. The case would become known as one of the most enduring missing persons cases in Missouri history. But for 22 years, no bodies were found. No suspects were charged. No meaningful leads ever materialized. Until a woman in Marble Hill bought a used paperback at a thrift store and found a photograph inside that made her stop breathing. The photo was folded into quarters aged at the edges and tucked between pages 153 and 154 of a 1980s romance novel. The woman who discovered it, 29-year-old Kelsey Harding, wasn't looking for anything unusual. She was browsing while waiting for her oil change to finish. The image showed three women seated on what appeared to be folding chairs inside a concrete-walled room. Their wrists were bound with duct tape, their mouths covered. One woman looked directly at the camera. The other two had their eyes closed. Lighting was dim, but the outlines of their faces were clear. One of them matched the photo Kelsey remembered from her childhood, a girl who had gone missing with her mother and best friend, the case that had haunted local news for years. Kelsey took the photo home, scanned it, and submitted it via the Missouri Missing Persons Clearinghouse tip form. She uploaded the image with a short note. "I found this in a used book at Secondhand Treasures in Marble Hill. I'm not saying this is them, but it looks like it could be." The following morning, Detective April Moreno of the Springfield Police Department received the alert. At first, she was skeptical. In her 12 years on the force, she'd seen dozens of false tips, blurry photos, misidentified women, messages from psychics, even confessions that went nowhere. But when she opened the attachment and zoomed in on the woman in the middle, she froze. The facial features, even with the grain and fading, were consistent with Rebecca Ward. The jawline, the eyes, the way her hair curled along her jaw just slightly on the right. She cross-referenced with the original case file. Then she pulled the missing posters of Jenna Ward 18 and Mallory Tate 19, and slowly realized, this wasn't a prank. This wasn't a mistake. This was a photograph of three women who hadn't been seen in 22 years, presumed dead, but never proven. The file was reopened. The photo was authenticated by digital analysts. Preliminary results confirmed it had likely been printed on Kodak instant film, no longer manufactured after 2004. The duct tape on the wrists, silver gray hardware store quality, matched brand types sold in the Springfield region around 2001. More chillingly, the background wall showed a partial hand-drawn symbol in faded red ink, a mark that had appeared in an earlier tip the department had received back in 2004 about a religious farm located 90 miles south of Springfield. At the time, the tip was dismissed due to lack of corroboration. Now it was revisited. The farm, once called Eden's Gate Fellowship, had since been shut down following tax fraud charges in 2007. But for nearly a decade, it had operated as an off-grid faith community with rumors of abuse, forced isolation, and cult-like practices. The symbol in the background, it matched a hand-drawn diagram recovered from that compound's chapel wall. Detective Moreno contacted the bookshop where the paperback had been purchased. The owner, Linda Rowe, confirmed that the book had been donated in a bulk lot from a closed storage unit outside Poplar Bluff. The unit had been abandoned for non-payment and sold at auction 6 months prior. The auction company provided paperwork with a single name, Ernest Langley, deceased in 2021, last known address in Baxter County, Arkansas. Langley had no criminal record, but a deeper dive revealed he was once listed as a maintenance assistant at Eden's Gate Fellowship from 1998 to 2002. At the same time, Detective Moreno contacted the families of the missing women. She brought them in separately. None of them were prepared for what they saw. All three, Jenna's brother Mallory's aunt and Rebecca's sister, independently identified the woman in the center of the photo as Rebecca Ward. Jenna and Mallory were harder to confirm, the lighting, the tape, the passage of time, but both families believed it was them. The case, once considered dormant, now had its first real lead in over 2 decades. The media was notified. Within 48 hours, the image was published in local papers and then picked up nationally. The caption was simple. Could these be the Springfield Three 22 years after they vanished? And underneath, photo found inside book sparks reopening of cold case. The chain of custody for the paperback book was quickly established. The shop owner, Linda Rowe, provided inventory logs showing that Love's Winding Road had arrived on April 18th as part of a bulk donation from an auction storage unit in Poplar Bluff. The unit had been purchased 6 months earlier by a reseller, then turned over to secondhand treasures when unsold books and furniture were cleared out. The auction paperwork listed the renter's name as Ernest R. Langley, deceased as of 2021. Langley had died of natural causes at 68. He had no surviving children and no spouse. His name wasn't in any criminal database, but a background trace turned up one connection. He had been listed as a groundskeeper at Eden's Gate Fellowship between 1998 and 2002. It was the first concrete link between the photograph and a location. The Eden's Gate property had been abandoned for over a decade. Located near Alton, Missouri, it spanned nearly 35 wooded acres, now overgrown and partially reclaimed by the Ozark Forest. The main building, a low L-shaped structure of cinder block and stucco, had once functioned as both chapel and living quarters. 2 detached cabins sat closer to the edge of the property, one of which had collapsed in a storm in 2014. County records showed the land was seized in 2007 due to unpaid taxes following the dissolution of the Eden's Gate entity. Ownership had changed twice since, but neither party had ever developed or cleared the area. Springfield detectives filed for a search order the same day the Langley connection was confirmed. Before executing the warrant, Detective April Moreno conducted interviews with individuals connected to Eden's Gate between 1995 and 2005. Most refused to speak. One woman hung up immediately. Another denied ever being part of the group. But one man agreed to meet a former delivery driver named Leon Gaddis, who had supplied food and hardware to the compound in the early 2000s. He met detectives in a diner just off Route 160. Mid-60s, weathered hands, quiet. "I didn't ask questions back then," he said. "They paid cash, always polite but real private." When shown the Polaroid photo, he stared for a long time, then said, "That room looks familiar." He pointed at the top edge of the frame, a metal conduit running along the wall. There was a storm shelter under the old chapel. Steel door, no windows, maybe 20 by 20 feet. "I delivered a generator once. Langley and another guy carried it down there." Moreno asked if he ever went inside. Gaddis shook his head. "Never invited. But I always wondered. That place gave me the creeps." The following day, accompanied by state troopers forensics and a forensic archaeologist, Moreno led the search team onto the Eden's Gate property. They followed the 2001 architectural layout submitted to the county tax board. According to blueprints, the original structure included a sub-level storage room directly beneath the chapel stage. It had never been inspected. No previous searches had reached it. Moreno stood over the area marked mechanical access, basement level 1, as ground-penetrating radar was deployed. The readings came back conclusive. There was an enclosed room approximately 8 feet underground, 22 feet wide, sealed on all sides. Concrete, unbroken. Until now. The first cut into the concrete came at 10:12 a.m. State troopers had secured the perimeter of the former Eden's Gate property. Yellow tape stretched around the chapel foundation. A small crowd gathered near the tree line. Reporters, curious locals, one man who claimed to be a former witness and refused to leave until he was escorted away. Detective April Moreno stood just outside the excavation perimeter, watching as the GPR operators marked the ground with fluorescent paint. 5 feet down, jackhammers met resistance. 8 feet down, it broke. What they uncovered was a steel trap door, rusted at the hinges, sunken slightly at the edges, welded shut from the outside. A fire department technician moved in with a plasma cutter. At 11:47 a.m., they cracked it open, and the smell that rose from below was enough to stop conversation. The room was exactly 22 by 20 feet. The air inside was stale metallic damp. A single bulb dangled from a wire in the ceiling, dead. The concrete walls were bare except for a few vertical stains that looked too dark to be water, and a scuffed patch in the far right corner where layers of paint had peeled into curls. There were no bodies, no blood pools, no overt signs of violence. But the signs of life of containment were unmistakable. A stained twin-size mattress sat in the center of the floor, no sheets. Metal hooks were bolted into the 2 side walls, 6 total. One still had a length of nylon cord tied through it, frayed at the end. On the ground beside the mattress, an overturned metal bowl. Empty. And near the base of the west wall, something shallow was scratched into the concrete. Detective Moreno crouched. 3 letters carved unevenly. Jen. The forensic team moved in carefully, collecting fiber air samples trace evidence. A small mirror cracked lay in the far corner, propped against the floor. An indentation along the southern wall matched the frame of what might have once been a door, now filled in with cinder block and plaster. The room had been sealed intentionally from the outside. They found no remains, but on the edge of the mattress an old earring, small, gold hoop. Partial DNA later confirmed skin cells female, unmatched but consistent with a biological female aged 15-30. A box of rusted nails sat beside the mattress. A plastic toothbrush handle snapped at the neck. A plastic crate containing a stack of worn magazines, all dated 1999 to 2001. Someone had lived here. More than one person. And for a long time. Outside, Moreno made the call to FBI Field Office Liaison Robert Keyes. Within the hour, a federal team was en route. By sundown, Eden's Gate was under full federal control. Among the items collected from the underground chamber, one object stood out. It wasn't the mattress, or the frayed cords, or the cracked mirror. It was something easily missed, a paperback book torn nearly in half, tucked beneath the bed frame's spine facing down. A partial title still visible, Living Witness, The Redemption of Truth. On the inside cover, scribbled in faint pen, Property of S.G. Eden's Gate, 2001. The handwriting was shaky, but legible. The name didn't match any victim. But the initials S.G. rang a bell. Detective Moreno cross-referenced the original list of known Eden's Gate members compiled after the 2007 tax seizure. Most names had been marked inactive, some deceased, others unverified. One stood out, Samuel Grover. Listed as discipleship coordinator, age 38 at the time the compound was active. Reportedly died in 2003 in a boating accident near Lake Tenicomo. But the death had never been certified, only assumed after his vehicle was found abandoned and his body never recovered. Moreno contacted the Missouri Bureau of Vital Records. No death certificate, no coroner report, no obituary. Only a missing person filing later, closed per presumed drowning, signed by a local sheriff who had since retired. She sent the initials to the FBI. Within 36 hours, they found a match. Simon Grady, age 60, currently residing in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, under a name acquired in 2004, Nathan K. Ellison. Home address, a modest mobile home on a wooded lot. Occupation, part-time maintenance worker at a county vehicle depot. No criminal record, no known family. He had never filed taxes before 2005. Further investigation revealed something else. Ellison's fingerprint had been recorded during a minor vehicle violation in 2009. At the time, it wasn't flagged. But now the partial print found on the inside back cover of the damaged paperback from the Eden's Gate chamber matched Ellison's thumbprint with 94% certainty. It was the first forensic connection between a living person and the sealed room. That afternoon, Moreno and 2 FBI agents met at the Springfield field office. "What do we know?" she asked. Agent Keyes answered. "Ellison's real name is Samuel Grover. He went dark in 2003. His vehicle was found near the lake with no signs of foul play. Presumed dead, but paperwork was never followed through. Any connection to the missing women? Not directly, but he would have had access to the underground structure. He helped design it per original permits." Moreno leaned forward. "Does he know we're coming?" Keyes shook his head. "Not yet." The next morning, a federal team departed Missouri and crossed into Oklahoma. Their mission was clear. Locate and detain Nathan Ellison, a.k.a. Samuel Grover, believed to be the last living person with direct knowledge of what happened beneath Eden's Gate. What they didn't know was that Ellison hadn't left the state. He was still there, still working, and still waiting. The mobile home sat half hidden behind a curtain of pine trees at the end of a gravel road outside Broken Bow, Oklahoma. No mailbox, no visible car, one broken porch light. It was 8:12 a.m. when the federal team pulled up. Detective April Moreno rode in the second SUV, flanked by 2 agents. The lead vehicle parked quietly. No sirens. No knocks with raised voices. Just measured steps toward a screen door that hung slightly ajar. A man stepped out before they reached it. He wore gray slacks, a white undershirt, and slippers. His hair was white, trimmed close. He looked older than 60, thinner, paler, but alert. "You're not the electric company," he said. Agent Keyes stepped forward. "Mr. Nathan Ellison." The man gave a half smile. Depends who's asking. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Then no, sir, that's not me. A pause. Then calmly he added, but I imagine you're not here about the power bill. Inside the home was sparse. Neatly kept, but almost empty, one chair, one cot, a short bookshelf with 7 volumes, all religious. No television, no photographs. Moreno scanned the walls, no crosses, no icons, no decoration. Ellison, or Samuel Grover, sat in the lone chair as the agent stood around him. We're reopening the investigation into the Eden's Gate facility, Keyes said. Grover nodded slowly. It was bound to resurface, he said. Truth likes to breathe. You were a leader there. A coordinator, discipleship and maintenance. Is this your handwriting? Moreno slid the damaged book across the table. Grover looked at it, didn't touch it. Yes. Where did that book come from? I left it, he said. It wasn't meant to be found, but nothing sacred stays buried forever. The agents exchanged glances. You know about the women, Keyes said. I knew of them. They were held underground. Yes. You participated. Grover tilted his head. I followed. I didn't lead. You helped build that room. I poured the floor. I didn't choose who walked on it. Moreno stepped closer. Are they alive? Grover looked up at her. If they are, he said softly, they're not the same. The room fell silent. Outside, wind rustled the pines. A dog barked in the distance. Moreno placed a photo on the table. It was the Polaroid, the same image that had reignited the case. Grover stared at it. There were others, he said. Others. Women, not always 3, sometimes 1, sometimes 4. He closed his eyes. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. For what? For stillness, obedience, the vanishing of the self. Moreno fought the urge to shout. Instead, she took a breath. Where are they now? I don't know. Who does? Grover opened his eyes. She does. Who? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached slowly to the shelf beside him and pulled out a thin, leather-bound notebook. He handed it to Moreno without a word. Inside were handwritten entries labeled only by dates and initials. One stood out. June 3, 2001, RWJWMT. Arrival complete. Orientation begins. Room 2 prepped. Silence 30 days. Moreno closed the book. What happened after? Sir 48 referring. Grover looked down. I left before the end. I don't know what came next. You faked your death. I disappeared. Same as them. You did it to escape charges. I did it because I believed the end had begun. As the team prepared to take him into custody, Moreno scanned the shelf once more. Tucked between 2 books was something small, metallic. She pulled it free. It was a charm bracelet. Sunflower-shaped. She had seen it before. In a photo dated 1998 on the wrist of Jenna Ward. She stared at it. Grover watched her. They never screamed, he said. They didn't need to. Samuel Grover, known for the last 20 years as Nathan Ellison, sat cuffed in the back of a federal transport vehicle moving westbound on I-44 toward Springfield. He hadn't spoken since they left the station in Broken Bow. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't make demands. He only watched the road with the patience of someone who'd already accepted that this would be his final trip. But just outside Joplin, as the agent in the passenger seat scrolled through case updates, Grover said something without turning his head. You're looking in the wrong place. Agent Keyes looked up. You want to clarify that? Grover smiled faintly. The room you found that wasn't where it ended, that was where they were tested. He paused. The true place, the resting, that's farther west. Keyes exchanged a look with Moreno, who sat in the rear cabin across from Grover. And who ran it, she asked. Grover's voice was steady. Not me, I was a follower. The architect was someone else. He shook his head. They never used one, only a title. Which was? He looked at her. The vessel. Back in Springfield, Moreno reviewed the seized notebook for a second time. Most entries were procedural lists of initials, dates, supply drops, phrases like sound day and midnight lesson. But near the middle, scrawled between pages in a different pen, was a repeated set of letters. Orsho, Shusher Yerdi. It appeared 11 times, always in the margin, once alongside. RH approves the final shift. Another entry, RH has arrived. All shall observe silence. Moreno flagged the initials and forwarded them to the analyst team. No known match in the Eden's Gate member registry. No criminal file. No tax ID. Anonymous, intentional. The vessel. She revisited the site diagrams drawn during the initial property seizure in 2007. There was the main chapel, the detached cabins, the known underground chamber. But tucked in the corner of an older blueprint, barely visible, almost faded, was a square marked storage exterior supply. It sat outside the main compound on the far western edge of the property, where the woods thickened and the terrain sloped down toward a natural spring. The structure had no plumbing, no electrical connections, and no official inspection date. She called Keys. We missed something. The next morning, GPR operators returned to Eden's Gate with a new target. The overgrown area took an hour to clear. Thick brush, fallen limbs, 2 crumbling stone posts that may have once been the edges of a foundation. By 10:42 a.m., the first passive radar showed anomalies beneath the surface. By 11:10, the data was clear. A rectangular chamber, 6 by 10 meters, roughly 9 feet below ground. No ventilation, no entrance visible from above, no recorded structure ever registered at the coordinates. A buried room, sealed. Moreno stood above the spot as the ground crew marked off the perimeter. She checked the notebook one more time. Last entry. No date, just a line. 3 will be watched, 1 will remain. The vessel has taken her west. She looked at the dirt, then back at the woods. We dig. The second underground chamber was accessed at 2:14 p.m. on a Wednesday. The soil above had been packed with a layer of stone, then sealed with thick concrete poured unevenly as if in haste. No trapdoor, no ventilation shaft, no stairs. Only a reinforced slab, hand-poured and sunken. It took over 4 hours to breach. When the last section of concrete gave way and the air rushed upward like a breath released after decades, the first forensic technician on scene paused at the edge of the opening and said, "This isn't like the last one." He was right. Unlike the first chamber, plain, functional, oppressive, this space was wide open and arranged. The walls were marked with paint symbols and lines of scripture scrawled in faded ink. Verses from various books, Revelation, Proverbs, sometimes misquoted, sometimes invented. A single wooden table stood at the center. Not a bed, not a chair, a table. 3 sets of manacles bolted to its edges. Rust stains ran in streaks from each corner to the floor. To the left, a narrow shelf made of cemented stone. On it, a silver basin now cracked. A torn page from a hymn book. A small object resembling a charm melted and fused to the rock. To the right, 2 full-length white robes still hanging from iron pegs embedded in the concrete. The room was dry, preserved, and dead quiet. On the far wall, someone had carved into the concrete, "You only bury the body, the faith stays alive." Below the words, a faint symbol matching the same spiral eye icon found in the Eden's Gate seal. Moreno stared at the letters. "They didn't build this to hide people," she said. Agent Keys stood beside her, reading silently. "They built it to finish them." The forensics team moved in with extreme caution. No biological remains were found in the open, but swabs taken from beneath the manacles returned presumptive positives for blood human, at least 2 different types. The robes showed fibers consistent with Eden's Gate-issued clothing recovered from the first site. Both were size medium. A footprint left faintly in dust near the wall revealed a shoe print size 6 women's New Balance model discontinued in 2003. No matching pair found. No explanation why it remained so clean. As if whoever left it had been the last person in that room and might not have entered through the top. The team cataloged every object. Then Moreno found the notebook. It was wedged behind a crack in the eastern wall, hidden between 2 stone blocks. Black cover, unmarked. Inside, 17 handwritten pages, no dates, no headings. Just lines, stanzas, directives. Words like, "Stillness is the measure of readiness. They weep not for their families, but for their disobedience. She was not chosen. She was held until RH arrived. The vessel does not grieve. He guides." At the bottom of the final page, a signature. Ari Arherj. Back above ground, Moreno stood with the notebook in her gloved hands, the wind catching her hair, the sky beginning to fade orange. "They built 2 places," she said. "One for holding," Keys replied. "And one for purging?" They didn't speak again for a long time. Then Moreno looked toward the trees. There might be a third. The notebook signed RH was turned over to FBI document analysts within hours. Most of the entries were doctrinal in tone cryptic lines, short phrases that read like sermons or coded instructions. But tucked inside the back cover, folded into a taped sleeve, was a small piece of graph paper. A hand-drawn diagram, uneven lines, 3 rectangular shapes stacked vertically and labeled only with single words. Top box chamber, middle box altar, bottom box sanctum. There were no measurements, no compass markers, no legend, but 2 symbols matched exactly the spiral eye icon of Eden's Gate and the broken cross that had appeared in earlier graffiti on the chapel ruins. The implication was clear. The chamber they had opened last week was not the final space. There was another. Using satellite imagery and archived blueprints from the county tax board, analysts overlaid the drawn diagram onto the Eden's Gate property. When they factored in topography and construction patterns used in the 1990s by rural religious developments, a section of the forest west of the second chamber stood out. The slope dropped sharply. The rock beneath was shallow limestone, diggable but ideal for underground storage. No records indicated any construction there, but the data suggested otherwise. A new GPR scan was approved. Survey crews would move in the next morning. While preparations for the dig commenced, another lead arrived. An email, sent by a retired private investigator named Thomas Crane, who had once volunteered on the original Springfield 3 case back in 2002. He still followed cold case forms, still tracked names that stuck in his head. This time the name was Marissa Ward, registered at a long-term residential psychiatric facility in Taos, New Mexico. Age listed 40, no birth certificate, no family contact. Admitted in 2019 under emergency care order after wandering into a sheriff's office 60 miles north with signs of memory loss and malnutrition. Crane included one note. Staff says she has a crescent scar beneath her right ear. That's where Jenna Ward was said to have had a birthmark. FBI field agents contacted the facility. The director confirmed the patient existed, still alive, still admitted. Quiet, compliant, but unable to recall key aspects of her identity. She had refused interviews, didn't speak much, wrote only occasionally. But 3 days ago, she had drawn something on a napkin. A triangle, inside it 3 letters. JMR, the first initials of the 3 women who disappeared in Springfield in 2001. Agent Keyes relayed the update to Moreno late that night. They sat together in a mobile command unit parked near the Eden's Gate site. You think it's her? Moreno asked. I think someone's still alive. At 5:42 a.m., a 2-agent team boarded a flight from Springfield to Albuquerque, then drove 4 hours north. They carried photos, DNA kits, and court orders. But more than anything, they carried a question no one had dared ask in years. What if one of them made it out? The facility sat on the edge of a desert ridge 3 miles outside Taos, New Mexico. Wind turbines turned lazily behind it. A faded sign near the entrance read, Whispering Pines, Long-Term Cognitive Care and Recovery. Inside the walls were pale blue. The furniture was soft. Everything smelled faintly of disinfectant and dried sage. The woman registered as Marissa Ward had been a patient since 2019. No known relatives, no consistent memories. She followed routines, responded to light prompts, and spent most of her time drawing in silence. But she spoke little, and never about the past. Until now. Detective April Moreno sat across from her in a quiet room, accompanied by Agent Sarah Klein and a clinical liaison. On the table between them, a single laminated photo, an age-regressed image of Jenna Ward estimated at 40 years old. The woman across from them, slight pale, short-cut hair, wore a light gray sweater and loose hospital pants. Her hands trembled faintly when she reached for the photo. She touched it gently, then looked up. I remember her, she said. It was the first full sentence she had spoken in weeks. Moreno leaned in. Can you tell us who she is? The woman stared at the photo a moment longer, then whispered, That's me. She said it with the detached clarity of someone stating a fact they weren't allowed to feel. Moreno kept her voice calm. What's your name? The woman paused. Then I don't know. She looked down. But I remember the sound the earth made when they covered us. The room went silent. Even the air conditioner seemed to stall. Agent Klein broke the silence. Covered you. The woman nodded slowly. It was soft at first, then heavier. It pressed in, and the light went away. "Where were you?" A pause, then simply below. They asked her about Mallory, about Rebecca. She flinched. "They left," she said. "Huiniers, Kumib, the vessel and the others. They said Mallory wasn't ready, that she needed to ascend somewhere else." "And your mother?" She didn't speak, just turned the photo over as if she couldn't look at it anymore. DNA results confirmed what her voice had already proven. The woman listed as Marissa Ward was in fact Jenna Elaine Ward, reported missing on June 3, 2001, along with her mother Rebecca and best friend Mallory Tate. She had been 18 years old. Now she was 40. The FBI issued a joint statement 2 days later. "We have identified one of the missing Springfield women alive and currently recovering in a protected setting. The investigation remains active and ongoing." The media erupted. But Jenna didn't see the coverage. She spent her days by the window staring at the desert ridge, drawing spirals and symbols on notepads that she often folded and threw away. When asked if she remembered Eden's Gate, she nodded. But she called it something else. The quiet house. She said the underground rooms were cold, that there was no sunrise, that they were told not to speak unless addressed, that Mallory cried the first 3 days, then stopped, that Rebecca tried to protect them and then one day didn't return, that sometimes they were moved blindfolded barefoot, that the vessel would speak once a week, that the lights went out forever after the ritual. She didn't know how she got out. She only remembered waking up in a wooded place with blood on her leg and no shoes, and walking. Moreno sat with her one evening long after formal interviews had stopped. Jenna held a mug of warm water in both hands. "Do you want to know what I remember most?" she asked. Moreno nodded. "The sound of Rebecca humming," she said, "even when it was cold. Even when they locked the grate, she would hum." She paused. "Sometimes I try to do it, but I can't remember the tune." Before leaving the facility, Moreno handed Jenna a second photo. Mallory, age regressed, simulated. Jenna studied it, then looked up and asked quietly, "Is she still alive?" 3 days after Jenna Ward was identified, she began to draw. At first they were scattered shapes, lines, curves, cross-hatched rooms, then symbols, arrows. Gradually the drawings took shape. A layout, a map. She used only pencil, pressing harder as she went, as if pulling the memory from somewhere below her skin. By the 5th day, it resembled a floor plan, sloped tunnels, branching corridors, and a central chamber labeled only with 3 letters, SCT. She tapped it once. "They took Mallory here," she said. Moreno brought the sketches to the command center in Missouri. Analysts compared them to the RH diagram recovered earlier. 2 things stood out. The spiral pathways Jenna had drawn almost perfectly overlapped the contour lines of the limestone ridge west of Eden's Gate. The SCT area, circular, windowless, sealed, lined up with a dip in ground radar, taken 3 weeks earlier, but dismissed as geological noise. They ran another scan. This time they found it. An underground chamber 16 meters in diameter, 10 meters below surface. No structural entry point, sealed on all sides. It was deeper than any of the others. By the following morning, excavation had begun. Crews worked in shifts. The limestone slowed progress. So did the silence, no animals, no roots, no airflow, as if the land itself had stopped breathing there. At 2:46 p.m., the drill pierced a hollow. Air hissed upward, stale warm but not rancid. Moreno stood by the breach watching as flashlights shone into the dark. This wasn't another storage cell. It wasn't a chapel. It was something else. A circle. The interior of the chamber revealed a domed ceiling reinforced with steel rods. The walls were smoother than the other rooms, plastered, hand-finished. No symbols, no words. Only one object sat at the center. A chair, and beside it a cot. On the cot, a folded cloth blanket. On the floor beside it a cup, ceramic, half full. And at the edge of the room near the far wall, something moved. A flutter. A shift of fabric. The forensics lead stepped back. "There's air in here, fresh." They scanned the chamber for heat. At first, nothing. Then a reading. Low, faint, but not ambient. Human. Alive. Moreno radioed for backup. They widened the breach and lowered 2 agents down with harnesses. 1 minute. 2. Then came the call. "We have a survivor." She was found curled against the back wall, Limbs thin, hair matted, eyes shut. Oxygen mask applied within seconds. IV line started in minutes. No ID, no speech. But when they showed her the photo of Jenna Ward, she blinked, then whispered. She said she'd come back. She gave no name when they found her. No voice beyond a whisper, no details. Just a quiet presence on the floor of a hidden chamber, curled in a position that looked more natural than conscious. Her eyes didn't track at first, her limbs barely moved. But when they showed her the photograph of Jenna Ward, she pressed her hand against it and closed her eyes. The DNA test took less than 36 hours to confirm what everyone already knew. The woman was Mallory Tate, reported missing in 2001 at age 19, now alive age 41. She was transferred to a secure care wing in Springfield Medical Center under protective supervision. No press, no footage, only a first name on the intake chart. She didn't speak much, but she nodded when addressed. She watched the windows. She reacted to music. She flinched at the sound of metal latches. She tapped her fingers 3 times before answering yes, twice for no. It became her language. Jenna arrived 4 days later. She walked slowly, eyes fixed straight ahead, hands folded together as if she were entering a chapel, not a hospital room. She said nothing as she stepped inside. Mallory was sitting up, alert, eyes fixed on the door. They didn't speak, didn't reach out, just looked. Jenna pulled the chair beside the bed, sat, and waited. 23 minutes passed before either of them moved. Then Mallory reached forward, picked up the cup of water on the tray, and held it toward Jenna. Jenna took it. Mallory let go. That was all. But it was enough. The staff recorded vital signs. The FBI documented the room access. Lawyers hovered in hallways. But inside the room, nothing happened. Not visibly. Just the slow rebuilding of recognition between 2 people who had once shared a world without clocks. Outside, Moreno watched from the observation window. They remember each other, she said. They always did, replied the trauma counselor. Will she speak? Maybe, but that's not what matters. Then what does? That she's not alone anymore. Later that night, Jenna asked to speak to someone from the investigation team. She didn't want a microphone, or a camera, or an agent with a folder. Just Moreno. They sat in a room with 1 lamp, 1 table, 1 tape recorder. Jenna stared at her hands, then said, she thought she was going to die down there, every day, but she never said it. Moreno waited. Jenna looked up. They told her she was chosen. They told me I was wrong. She blinked. We believed them for a while. Moreno nodded. Then Jenna added so softly it almost didn't register. But Mallory never forgot her name. Outside the hospital, reporters still camped on corners, but fewer than before. Most headlines had moved on. Yet inside the command center, the case files were still open. And the name RH was still circled in red on a dozen whiteboards. The vessel was known. Samuel Grover was in custody. But RH, the architect, the writer of Doctrine, the one who designed the rooms and gave the orders, had yet to be found. No fingerprints, no face, only words. But those were enough. Because the words had lasted. A handwriting analyst compared the notebook signed RH to several samples from known members of Eden's Gate. No match. A secondary search flagged a real estate filing from 2000, a deed for a property 2 miles north of Eden's Gate, signed by someone named Rachel Hale. The signature was similar. But the property had burned down in 2002, arson, no suspects, no victims found. And Rachel Hale had no verifiable record before 1997. Moreno stared at the name, then at Jenna's drawing, and the 3 letters scratched on the final page of the notebook. RHCs. It wasn't over, but it was moving. Later that week, Jenna returned to Mallory's room and brought her a notebook. She placed it on the table. Mallory didn't open it, just rested her hand on the cover, then tapped once, then again, 3 times. Jenna smiled. Mallory spoke for the first time on a Sunday. It had been nearly 3 weeks since they pulled her from the sanctum chamber beneath the limestone ridge. She hadn't asked questions, hadn't cried. She moved through the hospital halls like someone still underground, quiet, cautious, listening before each step. Jenna visited her daily. They didn't always speak, but they were never apart longer than an hour. That afternoon, a nurse entered the room to check Mallory's vitals. She wore her hair in a long red braid. Mallory stared at her for a long moment, then whispered, "Red woman." The nurse turned. Jenna froze. Moreno, observing behind the glass, stepped into the room. "Can you say that again?" she asked gently. Mallory didn't blink. She was the one who closed the door. Moreno sat. "Ha ha, who?" Her hair was red. She smelled like copper. She said silence is devotion. "Was this in the sanctum?" Mallory shook her head. "No, before the deep room." Later she told them the woman's name, or what she was called. They called her R.H. The team re-examined everything. Rachel Hale, red hair, vanished in 2002. Presumed dead in a fire with no body recovered. Tied to land deeds, possibly forged. But now Mallory's memory gave them something new. She didn't shout. She sang. All of her orders sounded like music. She carried a cane even though she could walk. She said the vessel obeys the word, but she was the word. The investigators stared at each other. They weren't just looking for a woman with initials. They were looking for a myth still alive. A forensic artist met with Mallory over the next week. With Jenna's help, they built a composite sketch. Soft jawline, thin lips, prominent nose, long hair tied in braids. Approximate age 45 at the time of Mallory's capture. Possibly early 60s now. The sketch was released only to internal agencies. No public alert. They didn't want her to run. Meanwhile, Jenna and Mallory began to walk outside. Escorted, always observed, but breathing real air. They sat in courtyards. Held hot tea. Learned how to hold eye contact again. Jenna said she didn't plan to testify if it came to trial. Mallory said nothing. But when asked if she would write something down, she picked up a pen. She wrote 6 words. "We weren't meant to be remembered." Then crossed it out. Underneath, she wrote, "But we were." The state attorney general met with both women privately. Charges were being prepared. Grover would not be released. The Eden's Gate property would be permanently demolished and turned into protected land. But RH was still missing. Still uncharged. Still breathing somewhere, perhaps under a new name, a new town, a new disguise. Moreno asked the question quietly. "Do you want to see her face again?" Jenna replied, "No, I want her to see mine." The final file closed on the Springfield 3 case contained 842 pages. It included 2 confirmed survivors, 1 body never found, 3 sealed chambers, 9 physical artifacts, 2 living witnesses, and 1 last photograph. Jenna and Mallory, side by side, not smiling, but alive. 6 months later, they left the hospital under protection. No press, no speeches, just morning air in their own footsteps. As they stepped into the waiting vehicle, Mallory paused. She looked at the sidewalk, then at the sky, then turned to Jenna. "I didn't think you'd make it." Jenna answered without looking away. "I didn't think we would."